A Brief History of the Empire, Part 1, by Stronach K. Thoj III. Before the rule of Tiber Septim, all Tamriel was in chaos. The poet Trasaces called that period of continuous unrest days and nights of blood and venom. The kings were a petty lot of grasping tyrants who fought Tiber's attempts to bring order to the land, but they were so disorganized as they were dissolute, and the strong hand of Septim brought peace forcibly to Tamriel. The year was 896 of the Second Era. The following year, the emperor declared the beginning of the new era. Thus began the Third Era, year Aught. For 38 years, the Emperor Tiber reigned supreme. It was a lawful, pious, and glorious age, when justice was known to one and all, from serf to sovereign. On Tiber's death, it reigned for an entire fortnight, as if the land of Tamriel itself was weeping. The emperor's grandson, Pelagius, came to the throne. Though his reign was short, he was as strong and resolute as his father had been. And Tamriel could have enjoyed a continuation of the Golden Age. Alas, an unknown enemy of the Septim family hired that accursed organization of cutthroats, the Dark Brotherhood, to kill the Emperor Pelagius I, as he knelt at prayer at the Temple of the One in the imperial city. Pelagius I's reign lasted less than 3 years. Pelagius had no living children, so the crown imperial passed to his first cousin, the daughter of Tiber's brother, Agnereth. Kintria, former queen of Silvanar, assumed the throne as Kintria I. Her reign was blessed with prosperity and good harvests, and she herself was an avid patroness of art, music, and dance. Look at that, we're spinning. Kintria's son was crowned after her death, the first emperor of Tamriel to use the imperial name Uriel. Uriel I was the great lawmaker of the Septim dynasty and promoter of independent organizations and guilds. Under his kind but firm hand, the Fighters Guild and the Mages Guild increased in prominence throughout Tamriel. His son and successor, Uriel II, reigned for 18 years. From the death of Uriel I in the Third Era, year 64, to Pelagius II's accession in the Third Era, year 82. Tragically, the rule of Uriel II was cursed with blights, plagues, and insurrections. The tenderness he inherited from his father did not serve Tamriel well, and little justice was done. Pelagius II inherited not only the throne from his father, but the debt from the latter's poor financial and judicial management. Pelagius dismissed all of the elder council, and allowed only those willing to pay great sums to resume their seats. He encouraged similar acts among his vassals, the kings of Tamriel. And by the end of his 17-year reign, Tamriel had returned to prosperity. His critics, however, have suggested that any advisor possessed of wisdom but not of gold had been summarily ousted by Pelagius. This may have led to some of the troubles his son Antiochus faced when it became his turn to become emperor. Antiochus was certainly one of the more flamboyant members of the usually austere Septim family. He had numerous mistresses and nearly as many wives, and was renowned for the grandeur of his dress and his high good humor. Unfortunately, his reign was rife with civil war, surpassing that of even his grandfather, Uriel II. The War of the Isle, in year 110 of the Third Era, 12 years after Antiochus assumed the throne, nearly took the province of Somerset Isle away from Tamriel. The united alliance of the kings of Somerset and Antiochus only managed to defeat King Orcam of the island kingdom of Piandonia due to a freak storm. Legends credit the Sigic order of the Isle of Artaeum with the sorcery behind the tempest. The Skyrim calendar. There are 12 months in a year. They are as follows. The first month is Morning Star. The second month is Sun's Dawn. The third month is First Seed. The fourth month is Rain's Hand. The fifth is Second Seed. The sixth, Mid-Year. The seventh, Sun's Height, the 8th, Last Seed, the 9th, Heartfire, the 10th, Frostfall, the 11th, Sun's Dusk, and the 12th, Evening Star. There are 7 days in a week, and they are as follows. The first day of the week is Morndos, the second, Turdos, the third, Midos, the fourth, Turdos. Now this one's spelled with a U, so there's Turdos, which is the second day of the week with T-I-R-D-A-S, and there's the fourth day of the week, which is T-U-R-D-A-S. Or maybe Turdos and Turdos. Anyway, like Tuesday and Thursday. Okay, the fifth day of the week, Fredos, the sixth day of the week, Lordos, and the seventh day of the week, Sundos. The story of Kentria II, heiress to her father Antiochus' throne, is certainly one of the saddest tales in imperial history. Her first cousin, Uriel, son of Queen Fatima of Solitude, accused Kentria of being a bastard, alluding to the infamous decadence of the imperial city during her father's reign. When this accusation failed to stop her coronation, Uriel brought the support of several disgruntled kings of High Rock, Skyrim, and Morrowind, and with the Queen Fatima's assistance, he coordinated 3 attacks on the Septim Empire. The first attack occurred in the Iliac Bay region, which separates High Rock and Hammerfell. Kentria's entourage was massacred and the empress taken captive. For 2 years, Kentria II languished in an imperial prison believed to be somewhere in Glenpoint or Glenmoral before she was slain in her cell under mysterious circumstances. The second attack was on a series of imperial garrisons along the coastal Morrowind Islands. The empress consort, Contin Arnix, fell defending the forts. The third and final attack was a siege of the imperial city itself, occurring after the Elder Council had split up the army to attack western High Rock and eastern Morrowind. The weakened government had little defense against Uriel's determined aggression and capitulated after only a fortnight of resistance. Uriel took the throne that same evening and proclaimed himself Uriel III, Emperor of Tamriel. The year was 121 of the Third Era. Thus began the War of the Red Diamond. Okay, so that was part 1 of a brief history of the Empire. And let's read part 2. Okay. Volume 1 of this series described in brief the lives of the first 8 emperors of the Septim Dynasty, beginning with the glorious Tiber Septim and ending with the great-great-great-great-grandniece Kentria II. Kentria's murder in Glenpoint while in captivity is considered by some to be the end of the pure strain of Septim blood in the imperial family. Certainly it marks the end of something significant. Uriel III not only proclaimed himself Emperor of Tamriel, but also Uriel Septim III, taking the eminent surname as a title. In truth, his surname was Montiarco, from his father's line. In time, Uriel III was deposed and his crimes reviled, but the tradition of taking the name Septim as a title for the Emperor of Tamriel did not die with him. For 6 years, the War of the Red Diamond, which takes its name from the Septim family's famous badge, tore the empire apart. The combatants were the 3 surviving children of Pelagius II, Fatima, Sepphoris, and Magnus, and their various offspring. Fatima, of course, supported her son Uriel III, and had the combined support of all of Skyrim and northern Morrowind. With the efforts of Sepphoris and Magnus, however, the province of High Rock turned coat. The provinces of Hammerfell, Somerset Isle, Valenwood, Elsewhere, and Black Marsh were divided in their loyalty, but most kings supported Sepphoris and Magnus. In year 127 of the Third Era, Uriel III was captured at the Battle of Ichdag in Hammerfell. En route to his trial to the imperial city, a mob overtook his prisoner's carriage and burned him alive with it. His captor and uncle continued on the imperial city, and by common acclaim was proclaimed Sepphoris I, Emperor of Tamriel. Sepphoris' reign was marked by nothing but war. By all accounts, he was a kind and intelligent man, but what Tamriel needed was a great warrior, and he fortunately, was that. It took an additional 10 years of constant warfare for him to defeat his sister Fatima, the so-called Wolf Queen of Solitude, who died in the siege of her city-state in the year 137 of the Third Era. Sepphoris survived his sister by only 3 years. He never had time during the war years to marry, so it was his brother, the fourth child of Pelagius II, who assumed the throne. The Emperor Magnus was already elderly when he took up the imperial diadem, and the business of punishing the traitorous kings of the War of the Red Diamond drained much of the remaining strength. Legend accuses Magnus's son and heir Pelagius III of patricide, but that seems highly unlikely for no other reason than Pelagius was king of Solitude following the death of Fatima and seldom visited the imperial city. Pelagius III, sometimes called Pelagius the Mad, was proclaimed emperor in the 145th year of the Third Era. Almost from the start, his eccentricities of behavior were noted at court. He embarrassed dignitaries, offended his vassal kings, and on one occasion marked the end of an imperial grand ball by attempting to hang himself. His long-suffering wife was finally awarded the regency of Tamriel, and Pelagius III was sent to a series of healing institutions and asylums until his death in the Third Era, year 153, at the short age of 34. The Empress Regent of Tamriel was proclaimed Empress Catariah the First upon the death of her husband. Some who do not mark the end of the Septim bloodline with the death of Kentria II consider the ascendancy of this dark elf woman the true mark of its decline. Wow, okay. Her defenders, on the other hand, assert that Catariah was not descended from Tiber. The son she had with Pelagius was, so the imperial chain did continue. Despite racist assertions to the contrary, Catariah's 46-year reign was one of the most celebrated in Tamriel's history. Uncomfortable in the imperial city, Catariah traveled extensively throughout the empire, such as no emperor had ever since Tiber's day. She repaired much of the damage that previous emperors and broken alliances and bungled diplomacy had been created from. The people of Tamriel came to love their empress far more than the nobility did. Catariah's death in a minor skirmish in the Black Marsh is a favorite subject of conspiracy-minded historians. The sage Montelius's discovery, for instance, of a disenfranchised branch of the Septim family and their involvement with the skirmish was a revelation indeed. When Cassander assumed the throne, upon the death of his mother, he was already middle-aged. Only half-elven, he aged like a Breton. In fact, he had left the rule of the Wayrest to his half-brother Uriel due to his poor health. Nevertheless, as the only true blood relation of Pelagius and thus Tiber, he was pressed into accepting the throne. To no one's surprise, Emperor Cassander's reign did not last long. In 2 years, he joined the predecessors in eternal slumber. Uriel Lariat, Cassander's half-brother and child of Catariah I, and her imperial consort Galaver Lariat, after the death of Pelagius III, left the kingdom of Wayrest to reign as Uriel IV. Legally, Uriel IV was a septim. Cassander had adopted him into the royal family when he had become king of Wayrest. Nevertheless, to the council and the people of Tamriel, he was a bastard child of Catariah. Uriel did not possess the Dianism of his mother, and his 43-year reign was a hotbed of sedition. Thus concludes Part 2. Here's Part 3. The first volume of the series told in the brief story of the succession of the first 8 emperors of the Septim dynasty, from Tiber I to Kentia II. The second volume described the War of the Red Diamond and the 6 emperors that followed its aftermath from Uriel III to Cassander I. At the end of that volume, it was described how the Emperor Cassander's half-brother, Uriel IV, assumed the throne of the Empire of Tamriel. It will be recalled that Uriel IV was not a septim by birth. His mother, though she reigned as empress for many years, was a dark elf married to a true septim emperor, Pelagius III. Uriel's father was actually Catariah's first consort after Pelagius' death, a Breton noblewoman named Galliver Lariat. Before taking the throne of the empire, Cassander I had ruled the kingdom of Wayrest, but poor health had forced him to retire. Cassander had no children, so he legally adopted his half-brother Uriel and abdicated the kingdom. 7 years later, Cassander inherited the empire at the death of his mother. 3 years after that, Uriel once again found himself the recipient of Cassander's inheritance. Uriel IV's reign was a long and difficult one. Despite being a legally adopted member of the Septim family, and despite the Lariat family's high position, indeed, they were distant cousins of the Septims. Few of the Elder Council could be persuaded to accept him fully as a blood descendant of Tiber. The Council had assumed much responsibility during Catariah I's long reign and Cassander I's short one, and a strong-willed alien monarch like Uriel IV found itself impossible to command their unswerving fealty. Time and time again, the council and the emperor were at odds, and time again, the council won the battles. Since the days of Pelagius II, the Elder Council had consisted of the wealthiest men and women in the empire, and the power they wielded was conclusive. The council's last victory over Uriel IV was posthumous. Andorak, Uriel IV's son, was disinherited by vote of council, and a cousin more closely related to that of the original septim line was proclaimed Sepphoris II in the Third Era, year 247. The first 9 years of Sepphoris II's reign, those loyal to Andorak battled the imperial forces. In an act that the sage Erenetine called, quote, Tiber Septim's heart beating no more, end quote, the council granted Andorak the High Rock Kingdom of Shornhelm to the end of the war, and Andorak's descendants still rule there today. By and large, Sepphoris II had foes that demanded more of his attention than Andorak. Quote, from out of a Sumerian nightmare, end quote. And that was in the words of Erenetine, a man who called himself the Comoran usurper, led an army of Daedra and undead warriors on a rampage through Valenwood, conquering kingdom after kingdom. Few could resist his onslaughts, and as month turned to bloody month in the year 249 of the Third Era, even fewer tried. Sepphoris II sent more and more mercenaries into Hammerfell to stop the usurper's northward march, but they were bribed or slaughtered and raised as undead. The story of the Comoran usurper deserves a book of its own. Parentheses, it is recommended that the reader find Palix Ilthier's The Fall of the Usurper for more detail, end parentheses. In short, however, the destruction of the forces of the usurper had little to do with the efforts of the emperor. The result was a great regional victory and an increase in hostility towards the seemingly inefficacious empire. Uriel V, Sepphoris II's son and successor, swiveled opinion back towards the latent power of the empire. Turning the attention of Tamriel away from internal strife, Uriel V embarked on a series of invasions beginning almost from the moment he took throne in year 268 of the Third Era. Uriel V conquered Roscrea in 271, Cathnoquia in 276, Yenslea in 279, and Ursiniet in 284. In the year 288, he embarked on his most ambitious enterprise, the invasion of the continent kingdom of Akavir. This ultimately proved a failure, for 2 years later Uriel V was killed in Akavir on the Battle of Ionith. Nevertheless, Uriel V holds a reputation second only to Tiber as one of the two great warrior emperors of Tamriel. Thus concludes part 3 of the brief history of the empire. I wanted to show this quick little picture here on camera. It's a cool little map of Cyrodiil, the imperial city. Okay. Alright, part 4. The first book of this series described, in belief, the first 8 emperors of the Septim dynasty, beginning with Tiber I. The second volume described the war of the Red Diamond and the 6 emperors who followed. The third volume described the troubles of the next 3 emperors, the frustrated Uriel IV, the ineffectual Sepphoris II, and the heroic Uriel V. On Uriel V's death across the sea in distant, hostile Akavir, Uriel VI was but 5 years old. In fact, Uriel VI was born only shortly before his father left for Akavir. Uriel V's only other progeny, but a morganatic alliance, were the twins of Marathia and Alosia, who had been born a month after Uriel V left. Uriel VI was crowned in the 290th year of the Third Era. The imperial consort Thonica was the boy's mother and was given a restricted regency until Uriel VI reached his majority. The Elder Council retained the real power as they had since the days of Catariah I. The council so enjoyed its unlimited and unrestricted freedom to promulgate laws and generate profits that Uriel VI was not given full license to rule until year 307, 17 years after he was crowned, when he was already 22 years old. He had been slowly assuming positions of responsibility for years, but both the council and his mother, who enjoyed even her limited regency, were loath to hand over the reins. By the time he came to the throne, the mechanisms of government gave him little power except for that of the imperial veto. This power, however, he regularly and vigorously exercised. By the year 313, Uriel VI could boast with conviction that he truly did rule Tamriel. He utilized defunct spy networks and guard units to bully and coerce the difficult members of the Elder Council. His half-sister Marathia was, not surprisingly, his staunchest ally, especially after her marriage to Baron Ulf Gerson of Winterhold brought her considerable wealth and influence. As the sage Ugarij said, when Uriel V conquered Ursiniet, but Uriel VI conquered the Elder Council. When Uriel VI fell off a horse and could not be resuscitated by the finest imperial healers, resuscitated, that's bad. His beloved sister Marathia took up the imperial tiara. At 25 years of age, she had been described by admittedly self-serving diplomats as the most beautiful creature in all of Tamriel. She was certainly well-learned, vivacious, athletic, and a well-practiced politician. She brought the Archmagister of Skyrim to the Imperial City and created the second Imperial Battle Mage since the days of Tiber Septim. Marathia finished the job her brother had begun and made the Imperial Province a true government under the Empress, and later the Emperor. Outside the Imperial Province, however, the Empire had been slowly disintegrating. Open revolutions and civil wars had raged unchallenged since the days of her grandfather, Sepphoris II. Carefully coordinating her counterattacks, Marathia slowly claimed back her rebellious vassals, always avoiding overextending herself. Though Marathia's military campaigns were remarkably successful, her deliberate pace had often frustrated our elder council. One councilman, an Argonian who took the Colovian name of Thoricles Romus, furious at her refusal to send troops to his troubled Black Marsh, is commonly believed to have hired assassins to claim her life in the year 339 of the Third Era. Romus was summarily tried and executed, though he protested his innocence to the last. Marathia had no surviving children, and Alosia had died of a fever 4 years before. Alosia's 25-year-old son, Pelagius, was thus crowned Pelagius IV. Pelagius IV continued his aunt's work, slowly bringing back under his wing the radical and refractory kingdoms, duchies, and baronies of the empire. He exercised Marathia's poise and circumspect pace in his endeavors, but alas, he did not attain her success. The kingdoms had been free of constraint for so long that even a benign imperial presence was considered odious. Nevertheless, when Pelagius died after a notably stable and prosperous 29-year reign, Tamriel was closer to unity than it had ever been since the days of Uriel I. Our current emperor, His Awesome and Terrible Majesty, Uriel Septim VII, son of Pelagius IV, has the diligence of his great-aunt Marathia, the political skill of his great-uncle Uriel VI, and the military prowess of the great-uncle Uriel V. For 21 years, he reigned and brought justice and order to Tamriel. In the year 389 of the Third Era, however, his imperial battle mage, Jagar Tharn, betrayed him. Uriel VII was imprisoned in a dimension of Tharn's creation, and Tharn used his sorcery of illusion to assume the Emperor's aspect. For the next 10 years, Tharn abused imperial privilege, but did not continue Uriel VII's schedule of reconquest. It is not yet entirely known what Tharn's goals and personal accomplishments were during the 10 years that he masqueraded as Liege Lord. In 399 of the Third Era, an enigmatic champion defeated the battle mage in the dungeons of the Imperial Palace and freed Uriel VII of his other dimensional jail. Since his emancipation, Uriel VII has worked diligently to renew the battles that would reunite Tamriel. Tharn's interference broke the momentum, it is true, but the years since then have proven that there is hope of the golden age of the Tiber Septim's rule glorifying Tamriel once again. Wow, okay, that concludes all 4 volumes of A Brief History of the Empire. Alright. Very interesting. Okay. Alright, I think we're going to end this one here.